Governance without a ruler. A project can drown in meetings, dashboards, notifications, and checklists, while nobody can say who made the decision. The cost is not only time, the cost is a constant sense that approvals happen, but accountability never arrives. When nobody appears to be in charge, governance does not disappear. It relocates into rules, metrics, and default pathways, and those pathways quietly govern more consistently than any visible leader. Power in modern systems is often distributed, not absent. Decisions are made in small, repeated acts: which ticket is accepted, which field is required, which alert is ignored, which approval is mandatory, which metric counts as done. Each act looks minor, yet the accumulation becomes policy. Start with a basic constraint. Attention is finite. A team cannot read every update, review every request, or inspect every result. Because attention is scarce, systems introduce filters, cues, templates, thresholds, and dashboards to decide what deserves focus. That filtering is governance. It decides what is legible and what is invisible. Now add incentives. If performance is measured by throughput, people are rewarded for closing items, not for questioning whether the right items exist. If performance is measured by risk avoidance, people are rewarded for adding approvals, not for reducing unnecessary steps. Metrics become proxies for value, and proxies reshape behavior. The system does not need a ruler when the scoreboard is running. Consider a generic approval chain. Each approver inherits a trade-off: approve quickly and risk blame later, or delay and avoid responsibility now. Delay becomes the safe default because it externalizes risk. The second-order effect is predictable. More checklists appear, more fields become required, and more meetings are scheduled to align. These additions feel like caution, but they are also power moves by the system. They shift decision cost onto the requester and distribute responsibility until it evaporates. A feedback loop forms. The longer approvals take, the more status updates are demanded. The more status updates, the less time remains to do the work that would actually reduce uncertainty. Uncertainty rises, and the system interprets that as a need for still more oversight. Oversight expands not because someone is malicious, but because the loop rewards visible activity over resolved ambiguity. Another mechanism hides governance. Defaults, a form's drop-down choices, a dashboard's ranking and notifications urgency level, a checklist's required boxes. These are not neutral. They define what the system can easily accept. What is hard to enter becomes hard to choose. What is easy to measure becomes what matters. Governance is encoded as convenience. Distributed decision-making also fragments authority. No single person wants the full burden of saying yes or no to complex outcomes. The system responds by decomposing the decision into smaller, deniable parts. One group owns the template, another owns the budget line, another owns compliance, another owns the calendar. Each part is rational in isolation. Together they create a structure where everyone participates, and no one governs in a way that can be named. The failure mode is subtle. The system starts to confuse process for legitimacy. It went through the steps becomes a substitute for it was judged. The appearance of governance, timestamps, approvals, checkmarks, replaces the substance of governance, explicit responsibility for trade-offs. This is not only a technical story, it is a story about values expressed through attention. What a system highlights is what it declares important. What it hides is what it declares unworthy of thought. When dashboards become the primary object of attention, people learn to serve what is visible on the dashboard. When notifications become the primary object of attention, people learn to serve urgency, not importance. Responsibility also changes shape. In visible governance, responsibility is attached to a person or a role. Someone owns the trade-off. In hidden governance, responsibility is attached to a procedure. The policy required it. The workflow did it. The metric demanded it. That shift protects individuals from blame, but it also erodes meaning. A system that cannot name who is responsible cannot clearly name what it is for. Power, then, is not merely who speaks the loudest in a room. Power is the set of constraints that decide what can be proposed, what can be funded, what can be shipped, what can be reversed, and what will be remembered. When no ruler is visible, the governing values are still present. They are simply encoded in the measurement and in the path of least resistance. The practical consequence is clarity. If governance is hidden, people will argue about personalities, while the real decisions are made elsewhere. Inside defaults, thresholds, and incentives, attention becomes misdirected, and the system keeps governing while everyone searches for someone to blame. Consider a single recent decision that felt as if it happened by itself. Examine it as a map of constraints rather than a story of individuals. Name the proxies that stood in for judgment: the metric, the checklist, the threshold, the approval step, the dashboard category. Notice where the trade-off was paid. Was the cost paid in delay, in extra documentation, in risk avoidance, in rework, in silence? Notice which incentives made that payment feel rational to each participant. Notice what the feedback loop rewarded: speed, caution, visibility, or deniability. Then name as precisely as possible the hidden governor, not a person, but the rule or default that decided the outcome. The point is not condemnation, the point is legibility, seeing what is actually in charge when nobody appears to be. When authority is hard to find, look for what cannot be bypassed.